Hi, Krishna, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I am answering a question that I received from one of you about Bhakti that I thought would make for a good video this week. So this will come from Anonymous, but the question is a good one. It goes like this. I don't get why we can't just decide to love God and have all our shackles broken. The path seems so clear and simple. Love God. You're an eternal soul, so don't associate with your ego and sense objects. Carry out your dharma in love and service to God without attachment to outcomes. So why do we continue to get caught up in worldly matters and struggle? Are we just dummies who forget all the time? Or are our mental and emotional patterns so deeply ingrained from years of reinforcement that it takes a while to shift into a different gear? These are actually a few questions, so we'll take them one at a time. They're really good questions, and hopefully some of these answers from the Bhakti perspective will be valuable to you. So let's start with the first one. Really good question. I don't get why we can't just decide to love God and have all our shackles broken. So, of course, what's implied here is that we are, to a certain extent, in this material world, to the extent that we think this is all there is. I am my body. I am my bank account. I am my fame or status in the world. I am my good looks, or I am my ugliness, or whatever we think, however we think of ourselves in purely material terms. If that's the only way in which we are experiencing ourselves and reality, there's a sense in which we are in bondage. There's a sense in which we are in avidya, or darkness, nescience, illusion, ignorance, called maya or samsara. And if we stay bound to that understanding of ourselves and to the world, it's like a cycle that never ends. And so spiritual life in Bhakti, as I've said in many different videos that I've done on Bhakti, why do we love God? Well, we love God because it's liberating. It liberates us from bondage, and it takes us to bliss. But it's also problematic to talk about Bhakti from the standpoint of liberation. Let me try to use an analogy. So let's say that you are sitting in a room and you find yourself sitting in this room and you're in chains and your feet are chained and your arms are chained and you can't get up. And on the other side of the room, there is someone that you're really, really attracted to. And this person's going to be someone that you would do anything to be with. And so the chains are a limiting factor that keep you from being with that person. But if we think of liberation from bondage, liberation from suffering as the goal in and of itself, that wouldn't take us into the arms of the lover across the room, would it? It would just, if all we thought that spiritual life was for was to make us free from bonds, then we wouldn't be realizing that the final step of what freedom really means is freedom to go and embrace the beloved. So when we think to ourselves, I don't get why we can't just decide to love God and I'll have all of our shackles broken, it's also sort of like saying God doesn't want us to, another way of putting it is that God doesn't want us to just be free. God wants us to be in a loving relationship. So it's tricky because it's not like God, like if you hear what's implied there, the idea is that if you love God, then God will set you free from the bonds. Like you're been in bonds maybe because you're bad or because you don't love God. And then that picture changes in the room, in that image of us sitting chained in the room with someone we really want to embrace on the other side of the room. They would be sitting in that room being like, well, whenever you get the right attitude or whenever you start loving me, which is the right thing to do, you ought to do it, you should do it, you have to do it, it's your duty to do it, it's the law to do it, then I'll let you out of your chains. The punishment will be over and you can go, right? So you see in that model, God is not a lover. God is like an authority figure. And there's a certain sense in which God's authority reigns over all things because God's the architect and designer and creator of all things. But the pinnacle of in Bhakti, the pinnacle is love of God, not respect, adoration, veneration of God as this high up authority figure, but personal, intimate, loving exchange with God. So we don't just want to get out of our it's not like, well, just love God, be good, you'll get out of your shackles, and then God will be pleased with you. It's not about pleasing God, it's about loving God. Getting out of the shackles is just so that we can love God. This is why it's Bhakti. It's said that getting out of the bondage of the material world is a byproduct of loving God. It's not the actual goal itself. In other words, when we cultivate love of God in our hearts, love of this divine being in our hearts, and we do that through mantra, we do that through association with people who are thinking, talking about loving, serving, worshiping God in so many different ways. We have it through music, and we have it through kirtan, and we have it through deities in the temple, altars that you take care of in your home, and so many different ways that we can love God. But you want to be around people who are doing that. There's all these practices, being around people who are serving God, loving, worshiping, and serving God, thinking about God, learning about God, chanting the names of God, prayer, time in communion with God. And as that relationship builds, the byproduct is that your chains loosen, because you're no longer thinking, oh, I'm just this body, I'm just a part of this world where only the literal things happening in this material world, the fluctuations of material energy, all that's the only thing that's real. And actually, God becomes the only thing that's finally real, because everything rests in, emanates from, is dependent upon this perfect divine source. So when our mood shifts into that being the center of everything, then suddenly we realize, oh, there's no more chains. And then we're free to go across the room and embrace God. So liberation is not the point, and God is not someone sitting there waiting for us to get it right. Also, the other thing you need to know is that these chains were things that we put on ourselves. Have you ever seen the devil card in the tarot? The devil card in the tarot, the chains around the individual's necks are put there. These are things that both the man and the woman in the devil card picture, they put on themselves, and they're big enough that they could take off very easily at any time. So the other thing about our bondage is that it's not put on punitively or as a kind of what do you want to say, a punitive, authoritative thing, like a parent who's like, you sit down until you've thought about it and then you get it right, and it's not like that. We've chosen to be in this realm of reality where we've drunk deep from this material energy and have forgotten our true nature. That's allowed. We're not condemned, we're beloved no matter what. So at any point in time when we choose to take off our bondage, then God is waiting for us. That's the paradigm. It's not a paradigm also of can't we just decide to love God and have our shackles broken? It's not like God is like, yes, now you love me, so I'll take your. It's not the idea. Okay, so what goes along with this is also that deciding to love God is not enough. It's the deciding to love God means that we start practicing and actually loving God in service. We have the great gift of getting to continue to be conscious beings forever. And so loving God means serving God. Loving God is an action, not not some kind of intellectual shift. It's not a shift in principle, it's a shift in behavior, it's a shift in action. This is why sadhana, daily practice of loving God, is so important. And eventually it leads from practice needing discipline to raw, spontaneous, organic. Remembrance is the very air that we breathe. But until then, we practice, and the practice is needed because we have such inertia, we have such material inertia. And this gets into the next question. The path seems so clear and simple. Love God, you're an eternal soul, so don't associate with your ego and sense objects. Carry out your dharma in love and service to God without attachment to outcomes. Seems simple, but the reason that it's a practice is because, we've been associating with this energy of Maya from quote unquote time immemorial. The word in Sanskrit, anadi. Some people will say that means without beginning, without origin. So the association is very deep. It's like to just make a simple comparison. Loving God is very difficult. What to speak of, not drinking caffeine or not smoking or not, doing drugs or drinking or not engaging in other self-destructive behavior, whatever it might be. Think of how difficult it is, how humiliating, embarrassing, and simple our faults and flaws are, the ones that we really can't change, that are really hard to work on, that we don't want anyone to see. Those faults and flaws, right? Think of how hard it is to make headway on those. They're so ingrained. So similarly, the point is not to fix our flaws. The point is to love God. And when we love God, forgiveness and mercy start to flow through, and gradually, we become more virtuous. We start to glow like the saints' halo. There's an effulgence that surrounds people like this. The first time, that I met my guru, and the first time that I've been in the association of some what I would consider very saintly, elevated bhaktas, it's like they're glowing. They're very humble. They're very calm. They're very simple. They're very sweet. Are they imperfect? Sure. Still human. But that's because of decades of practicing devotion, and that it softens us over time, very, very gradually. So the choice to love God is the choice to very gradually take ourselves out of our own bondage, our own delusions about who we are and what is real and what really matters. And very, very gradually, then we come to love God naturally as our natural state of being, which is ongoing in every moment, in every continued, dimension of our existence. So it takes practice to disentangle ourselves from association with things that are in illusion and not focused on God. And the other thing is that for love to be real, it has to be a choice. You can't just be like, please, this really sucks. Get me out of here. Okay. Like, I love you. I believe in you. Just like mercy, like actually God is like, you know what, that you want the real thing. You want it to be really real, to be really chosen, and to be embodied, to be something that we've actually become. And not just that, when I grew up in Christianity, this was a troubling thing for me. For example, you have this conversation about the difference between grace and working out your own salvation. And the Bhakti tradition is a bit of both. So on the one hand, there's nothing we can work out on our own. Karmically speaking, you can try to become the best person in the world, and that doesn't cut it. It's mercy or grace that brings a person to any real realization about God or loving God. So it's always mercy or grace. But also, when we're trying to we have to learn how to receive mercy and grace. And to receive it, we have to practice putting ourselves in the position to receive it. And then it's like putting ourselves in the position to receive the support, help, love, nourishment that we need. And that's what brings us along. So we have to work out our own salvation through practice, but ultimately the salvation is free. We're just learning how to open our hands to receive it. So that's why practice is so necessary, as far as I've understood. And Bhakti, again, is very similar to Christianity in this regard, where there's going to be sometimes you have Christians who say, nope, just say a prayer, believe that Jesus did it for you, and that's it. And in Bhakti, it's not quite that simple. It is simple in the sense that there's no effort you can make to, receive love of God or to awaken the spirit soul, so to speak. But because it does come from mercy, but at the same time, the one who is ready to be the beneficiary, of God's mercy is the one who in some way reaches out from the heart. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you could offer me a leaf or a flower or a piece of fruit or a little bit of water, and I'll reciprocate. I'll take it as a sign of your offering to me, your love for me, and magnify it like 10 times. That's Krishna's attitude in general. So in Bhakti, we say it's not a heroic thing either. It's your effort is required, just as in Christianity, one has to imitate the life and teachings of Christ. This is similar to the Buddha, imitate the way of the Buddha, and so forth. So you see it in a lot of traditions like this, where your engagement in the process of receiving mercy is important, but it is coming from mercy. So hopefully this has answered some of the questions. I jumped ahead. You said, are we just dummies who forget all the time, like this? And sometimes we can be like that, but a lot of the time it's just that learning to redirect our heart and our soul naturally to what's healthy and good for us, what's true, real, beautiful, just. It's something that requires constant practice. And as we go along, we're brought up through God's never-ending grace. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to direct them to me at info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope that as you are continuing on your Bhakti path, that you have taken a look at my video on easy practices of surrender, which includes some instructions on mantra meditation. It's the simplest way to begin the devotional journey is to take up the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, practice it. It is the medicine for the Kali Yuga. It is a very beautiful, deeply healing mantra that I pray that you will take up in your heart, because if you're looking for a way of taking these talks and bringing them into your daily life, mantra meditation is the place to start. Okay, that's what I've got. Take it easy, everyone. Hare Krishna.